In this video, we will explore the complexities of ethnicity in Nigeria and its connection to the nation's economic growth. How do Nigerians perceive ethnicity, and what impact does this perception have on the country's development? We'll dive into when and how these perceptions began, particularly through the lens of colonial interference. What contradictions exist between the Constitution's definition of ethnicity and traditional community beliefs? And how has this shaped Nigeria's economic stagnation? We'll also question whether ethnicity should be viewed merely as a cultural label or as a vital institution with its own governance and economic ideology. Stay tuned as we address these important questions. Welcome back. If you are new here, please subscribe and follow us on all NEAT social media platforms at neatcommunity.ng. Also, it will be nice if you can turn on the notification icon so you can get notified each time we upload new content. There are a number of topics we need to cover, so rest assured we will be uploading new content every week. NEAT is an acronym for Nigerians Engineering Astounding Tomorrow. It is an initiative designed to bring together young and intelligent Nigerians who have what it takes to look beyond the challenges and divisions in the country and formulate a plan that would transform the nation and follow through with the plan. Today we're talking about ethnicity. We have touched on this topic in some of the past videos. One of the videos that touched heavily on ethnicity is the one that talks about tolerance. In that video, we did mention that ethnic communities in Nigeria have all been affected due to colonial interference, and that reuniting the ethnic institutions requires tolerating each other. To tolerate each other, there is a need to learn and understand each other. We also gave a hint of a better way to view and understand ethnicity. In this video, we want to dig deeper into the conversation. This is because, as you may have noticed, virtually in almost all the conversations, ethnicity seems to feature heavily. In all honesty, ethnicity is a critical topic, whether you are looking at why Nigeria and indeed other African nations are failing, or you want to talk about the solution for a better tomorrow. If you look at things properly, there is no way of discussing the past, present, or future trajectory of the Nigerian economy without talking about ethnicity or tribalism. Now let's start this conversation with a simple question. What do you think is ethnicity? Take a pen or a writing material, write down your answer. You can pause the video now, answer the question, and continue later. For those who may have watched any of our past videos, you may have a different answer compared to those who had not. That's totally understandable. Now back to your answer. What did you write down? How did you answer the question of ethnicity? I hope you didn't go with the same answer that ethnicity is where someone is from. This is the most common perception of the way people conceptualize ethnicity. They often see it as a label assigned to an individual based on where they are from. But what does that even mean? Have you ever wondered the practical meaning of where someone is from? Can we say ethnicity means where someone is born? Can we say that in Nigeria, the meaning of ethnicity is where a child is born? In practice, do people really view ethnicity as the label assigned to a child or an individual based on where they are born? The notion that someone is a native of the land where they are born is a concept fronted by the Nigerian Constitution. The Constitution assumes that provided a child is born in any land in Nigeria, such a child is a native of that land and by extension a native of the country. However, the Nigerian communities do not agree with this. This contradiction between the Constitution and the traditions of the different communities is one of the sources of the economic stagnation that is experienced in Nigeria. It is also one of the reasons that make this conversation on clarifications of ethnicity such an important one. Since communities do not believe that a place where someone is born defines their ethnicity, then what do they use? How do they define it? The current practice follows a mental label system, where people just assign a label to others based on perception. This could be based on physical looks, names, language, or any other traditional or cultural assertions. This is why, when two people who are believed to be from one tribe or ethnic community marry in another community, the child from that union is automatically labeled as belonging to the ethnic community of the parents, regardless of the place the child was born. Even in instances where a child from two parents of supposedly different ethnic communities lives, speaks, and practices the culture of the new community, others still find it hard to receive or accept the child as part of the new community. This also extends to when a child is born from parents who are from two different ethnic communities. At times, they are not received from either or even both communities. There are several instances where a man and woman believed to be Igbo give birth to a child in Yoruba land, yet the child is never accepted or recognized as a native of the Yoruba community. The same applies vice versa. The reality that there is such a huge contradiction between the Constitution, which is paraded as the law of the land, and the actual law of the land of different communities, is a massive deterrent to economic growth. It is also a reminder of the nature of the changes that need to be made in Nigeria to align economic potentials and realities. Also, it gives an idea of the situation that exists currently, which features the Constitution trying or attempting to do what seems above its capacity. As has already been mentioned in some of the past contents, Nigeria is not an establishment that started in 1914, or with the colonial interference in whatever year. No. It is an attempted forceful amalgamation of different self-existing communities into one, in a way that is only producing chaos rather than progress. The different ethnic communities in Nigeria already had their way of life and means of communicating and transmitting their laws and economies. Most of those were transmitted through oral and lived experiences. The attempt to forcefully change them without dialogue or even introducing a system to sustain the change seems a mere waste of time. It has never worked and may never work, and that is putting it mildly. The reality is that there were already laws, cultures, and practices that existed in many of the lands. Those laws live on, and every day are being transmitted from one individual to another, ensuring that the institution itself remains alive. The goal of eradicating them through some set of rules written in one book by some group of individuals sitting in one house sounds more like an exercise. Instead of bringing structured change that would produce a better economy, it would produce more chaos, animosity, and conflicts between people. In this effort to build a better nation, we must bear this in mind. Communities already existed as institutions, and those institutions already had laws, and those laws live on. If we are to change things, we have to start by asking the right questions. For example, instead of trying to force a particular narrative of what ethnicity is or should be at the different communities, we should focus more on understanding their unique perspectives. Remember, we mentioned in the video on tolerance that a good way to disagree with someone is to first understand their perspective. If we're to introduce or homogenize any specific definition of ethnicity, we must begin by understanding the perspective that existed. So the important question now is, how did the different ethnic communities define and understand ethnicity? Could it be that there was a particular definition that may have been distorted due to the colonial interference? If there was, what could it have been and what led to the change? If you go back to what we said before, you will agree that the current approach of ethnicity is more of a label that people assign to others based on perception. Basically, it is more about quantifying a stranger than self. What happens mostly these days is that people view ethnicity as a means of identifying or quantifying a stranger rather than self. In most cases, when people don't believe or do not want to accept someone, they rush to ethnicity as a means of positioning them in a box different from where they position themselves. But is this the right way of defining ethnicity? The simplest answer is no. Can we say it is a product of historical transmission of the perception of ethnicity? Maybe, but we still need to understand the origin of this transmission. This approach will likely help us in establishing why the current perception of the meaning of ethnicity is wrong. To do that, we need to revisit colonization again. This time we can focus on the colonial reports. Unlike now, when the governing body or the government have become so unaccountable to anyone, the colonial government did a lot better. Those days, they produced a colonial report that gave an idea of the economic, financial, cultural, and to some extent environmental status of the colonies. These reports not only gave the right people a better picture of what is going on in the so-called colonies, but also left important messages for us today. One of those messages is for us to understand the origin of our problems and how to solve them. It also helped in setting a standard that any objective person can use to compare the performances of what were supposedly colonial administrators and what are supposedly indigenous administrators. Without those reports, conversations like this could have been much harder, especially now that it seems people are so intertwined in the colonial system that they can't seem to see anything else. Anyway, those colonial reports presented ethnicity as a mere label, something that has no specific meaning or practical understanding. One of those reports saw ethnicity as something that, when you look at it from afar, you think it is a group of people. But when you get closer, you see that they are actually different. Simply put, the report created a scenario that ethnicity is more of a label for agreement and disagreement more than any other thing. It was indeed this perspective and viewpoint of the colonial administrators that promoted a very dangerous precedent that we see today. Although we can't really argue that it was the colonial system that introduced such ethnic identity confusion, it sure expanded it. In Beyond the Past, it was argued that the ethnic confusion may have already started before the arrival of the British proxies in Nigeria. It is very much likely that the indigenous people, that is, the descendants of the ethnic communities, those who took over the administration of the different ethnic communities, did not understand what they were taking over. They may not have asked their ancestors the critical questions about the origin and meaning of different things, but just went ahead to practice them. As a result of this, and also due to lack of strategic methods of retaining and transmitting the key messages, different vital information, such as the meaning and purpose of ethnicity, may have been lost. In summary, amongst other things, the book argued that the issue may have been influenced by the descendants of the ethnic communities who lost touch with the traditional understanding of the local systems. However, the enforcement of the extraction of human and material resources from Nigeria to the international economy formalized the ethnic confusion we see today. Had colonization not ravaged nearly all the African communities, not even Nigeria alone, the true picture of the meaning of ethnicity could have emerged a long time ago. Away from whatever may have happened in the past, where we are today is that the present generation does not have any knowledge on the meaning and value of ethnicity. The picture that ethnicity is a label for isolating a stranger from the internal is a distorted view that lacks any grounding. Also, it holds no promise to the national, intercontinental, or even global economic progress. It is therefore important for us to clarify what ethnicity is. Fortunately, this had already been discussed or hinted at in one of the previous videos. To keep it simple, the best way of understanding ethnicity is not through food, attire, language, land, or even people. It is also not about culture, as we understand culture today being a demonstration of what may have been practiced in the past that is carried over to date. Instead, a better way to understand ethnicity is through an institution. Think about any company today, for example, a bank. It may consist of various buildings, assets, employees, suppliers, customers, etc. None of these components give the bank its identity, except the fact that they are all connected to an institution with a particular governance system. In the same way, ethnicity is an institution. But unlike many institutions you see today that find identity in their logos, names, or brand colors, ethnicity finds identity in its economic philosophy. It is about a specific model for economic direction. Especially for those who read the scriptures, one way to view ethnicity is through the lens of scriptures, particularly the part that says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us." So ethnicity is like bundling different words as an economic instruction into a body and commanding the body to live perpetually. If you remember that in one of the videos we did, say that the institution is a network of people who through cycles of births and deaths remains perpetually alive. Each time you think of ethnicity, think of economic ideology. think of it as a way of life. You should not forget also that in one of the videos, it was explained that a way of life and economy are two ways of saying the same thing. In general, what makes an ethnic institution is the aggregation of several things into an economic direction. Although food, attire, land, language, or culture are the default things that come to mind, they are not really the main thing that defines an ethnic institution. The main thing that defines an ethnic institution, or the heartbeat of the ethnic institution, is the governance system. The governance system defines the pattern and the decision trajectory. Whether one is a member of an ethnic institution or not should be more about their attitude to the governance system. The patterns and systems of arriving at the governance system are also another important parameter in defining the sustenance and relevance of the ethnic institution. There's another topic we need to discuss here. If we say that ethnicity is about economic ideology, then where and how did it originate? Or better still, how did we arrive at such a definition that ethnicity is about an economic model? This question may take this conversation beyond this scope, so we will deal with it in detail in another video. However, one important thing we need to note is that ethnicity and religion are highly connected. In one of the past videos, it was already mentioned that ethnic marriages are components of an ethnic institution and were created by God of that ethnic institution. You may want to look at the video that talks about why it is difficult to fix Nigeria to get a clearer picture. Therefore, we can say that this definition is a product of philosophical interpretation of scriptural positions, as well as careful analysis of realities before us. To understand this argument, we must be objective to the position that if not most, some of the African communities have much deeper history than many of us realize. There are high chances that several of them are part of the descendants of the children of Israel. The idea that only the present-day state of Israel is the exclusive descendants of the children of Israel lacks any conclusive evidence. Children of Israel aside, there is no evidence to suggest that only the descendants of the children of Israel had a relationship with the same God of Israel. There is even a record of the story of the land of Nineveh, which, despite not being part of the descendants of Israel, history suggests they already knew or had a relationship with the same God. It is very possible that several of the Nigerian ethnic communities are either direct descendants of the children of Israel or already had a direct relationship with the same God of Israel. The importance of this is first the clarity of the source of the definition of ethnicity and its intersection with religion. We will also discuss this in detail in future videos. But it is important to note that religion is not necessarily the same narrative as what the colonial system tries to force on us. It is the notion that there are different arrangements of people into different ethnic institutions. Ethnicity, on the other hand, is about the unique arrangement or the unique features of a particular institution. Understanding religion and ethnicity from this light is very important. Connecting it with the economy and the supernatural is a very vital way of making the most of it, and also appreciating the task ahead. In most conversations about building a better nation, you don't usually hear this perspective. Most people just think it is about building infrastructure. They tend to ignore the importance of clarity and understanding of what an economy is and how an infrastructure is supposed to be there to help an economy. They also think that the economy can be forced on people without realizing that the economy is already on the people. It only needs to be improved by improving the people and their natural institutions. In Nigeria today, many people often engage in what they think are ethnic or tribal disputes. They often fail to realize that they are only demonstrating a lack of understanding of the meaning of ethnicity. For example, the people who claim to be speaking for an ethnic community often fail to ask themselves if they are even protecting the interests and values of that tribe. One common way of showing lack of protection or allegiance to the ethnic community is failing to protect the integrity, sovereignty, and autonomy of the governance system. In Nigeria today, many of those who claim to be tribal people hardly speak for the freedom and autonomy of the traditional governance system. In fact, One of the most common things you hear in Nigeria today is that the traditional rulers play a strategic role in governance. No one asks the question of why strategic, instead of the supreme role they once played. Is there any economic benefit of reducing their role from supreme to strategic? Many do not realize that these seemingly modern systems are only means of destabilizing and distorting the ethnic institutions. They do not realize that it is a way of ethnic cleansing, which started long ago during the colonial interference and has remained till date. They also fail to see that what they think is a tribal dispute has no bearing on the real interest of the ethnic institutions, but only a means of profiting the external market, as we discussed before. If we are to build a better nation, it has already been said that we need to decolonize. How do you do that in this regard? How can understanding ethnicity for what it is and applying that knowledge help transform the Nigerian economy? We will discuss this in the coming videos. In the meantime, share your thoughts in the comments section. But as we would always say, don't forget to also visit the NEAT platform to participate in more strategic conversations on how to leverage these clarities to build a better nation. Thank you, and see you in the next video.